You've written this piece with quotes from Lieutenant General Mike Elvis, who is a senior official within, or a senior general within the British Army, saying Donald Trump talking about a deal between Russia and Ukraine is effectively a huge risk. If it happens, why does he think it emboldens Russia and this alliance that they have with Iran and China and North Korea?
Well, he was talking at the International Armoured Vehicle Conference in Farnborough yesterday, which I was attending. And he basically was making the point that if this deal does go ahead, then it's going to give Russia time to rebuild and reconstitute its forces. And he was also suggesting that also, we will have to think about obviously doing the same thing, and therefore indicating that we've all got to be in this arms race and prepare for the next conflict. So actually any peace deal with Russia will amount to us just all facing another war in a few years' time when everyone's managed to build up their forces.
Did you get the sense that he was talking about, whatever this deal might be, but possibly Ukraine ceding some territory, that it would be coming back for more of Ukraine, or is this a wider threat to the West we're talking about here?
Well, look, he didn't go into it, but I mean, anyone that you sort of speak to in these military circles fear that Eastern Europe could be a target next. And obviously, if he's able to rebuild his forces and he's got the manpower available, then he could try and take Ukraine properly, take all of the territory, and then move on into NATO territory. And that's obviously everybody's big concern here. And even if he does go into Ukraine and we've got potential training troops there or something similar, then that could also trigger a wider war that would involve countries such as the UK and potentially the US. So I think he was trying to suggest really that there's a lot at stake here, and also indicating that Putin can't be trusted to agree to a fair deal, because if he does agree to anything, it's only going to be what serves his national interest. And he has made very clear that he is intent on taking Ukraine, and there's nothing to suggest that he's going to give up anytime soon.
Donald Trump on day 2 of his presidency said that Russia would be in big trouble if it doesn't come to the table and agree a deal to end the war with Ukraine. Do you think Donald Trump, there would be some that would accuse him, wouldn't there, of wanting this almost just to make himself look good? I'm the one that ended the war in Ukraine. Nobody else has managed it prior. But do you think he is also aware of the potential risks that he is creating if he does put this deal down on the table? And maybe that's partly why he wants so much more spending within his NATO allies to sort of protect themselves from a risk that maybe he knows he's creating.
They were pretty interesting comments, and we've been told as a newspaper that he wants to win this Nobel Peace Prize for his work on Ukraine specifically. And so he's obviously been speaking to people in the last few weeks that have made him realise that he's not going to get a deal done in 24 hours, that actually within the first 100 days, that's probably more likely. And then he's using all this sort of bombastic rhetoric to try and tell Putin, look, you're going to have to come to the table, whether you like it or not. And if you don't, then we're going to give Ukraine everything we possibly can to help them to win. Now, that could actually work out in Ukraine's favor, potentially, if Putin didn't agree to a deal and he gave way more money to the Ukrainians and more weaponry that the Ukrainians have been asking for, and actually gave them enough to win, because that's been the concern at the moment from the Ukrainian side, is that the Europeans and the US have been helping them, but they've not been giving them enough equipment, enough money for them actually to be able to push Russia out. And also that would probably be quite a view that would be favoured in Europe, because when I speak to British military chiefs and European military officers, the point that they make is that Ukraine has got to be doing well on the battlefield. They've got to go in with a good hand if they're going to go into negotiations. And countries like the UK are really keen to make sure that they are winning on the battlefield, and therefore force Putin into making some sort of deal or concessions that favour the UK more than him.
Clearly, we can't know what any deal might look like as yet. But something that struck me about these comments that you've written about here is would a deal solely be between Ukraine and Russia? And either way, I guess would a deal not involve guarantees from Russia that that the general's concerns can't be part of the future? Now, Ukraine might go, well, we can't trust Russia, but I wonder whether if the deal then involves signatories, say from the United States, they could better enforce such guarantees that Russia goes, we ain't coming for any more of Europe.
They could, in theory, obviously put NATO troops inside Ukraine and say, well, Russia, if you come back for more, then actually we've got all our NATO forces prepared to defend Ukraine. Um, you saw in 2022 in the build-up when Russia were building up all those forces on Ukraine's border, at the point that the NATO and the NATO believed that they were actually going to go in, everyone left, including British training troops. So Putin could probably guess that that might happen again. Would it actually provide Ukraine with that many assurances, or would they just run away if Putin tried to come back? I think some people would be quite skeptical also about trying to prevent Russia from building up its military arsenal inside Russia, because how are they going to be able to monitor necessarily what China and North Korea and Iran might be sending them? And so I think there's a lot of doubts about what deal can be made, but obviously one would hope that the Ukrainians would have some sort of assurances, because otherwise, why would they agree to it?
Larissa, there's also quotes in your piece from the commander of NATO's Allied Rapid Reaction Corps that quotes Russia will be a whole lot better next time around. What do you think he means by that?
Well, he was basically saying that obviously in 2022, Russia didn't manage to fulfill its war aims, and everyone saw what it was doing and its military tactics, and they were pretty shocked at how terrible they were, really. I think before that, everyone had been quite frightened of the prospect of the Russian armed forces heading into Ukraine, but actually they were surprised by how the troops weren't working together, the senior leadership, command and control units, and generally how they conducted warfare. Whereas a point he was making was that now they've obviously had several years fighting against Ukraine and its Western weaponry, and they've adapted. And over time, they're going to be able to adapt and modernize even more. And so, actually, if it comes to a point in a few years' time when we end up face to face with Moscow, well, actually, they're going to be perhaps ahead of what we originally thought, because of all the time they've had to practice fighting on the front line.
It's one thing though to be, more prepared, more battle hardened, I guess, have more understanding of what modern warfare is like. It's another thing entirely to have the sort of hearts and minds which is so important during war. And of course, we know that Vladimir Putin has been really, really desperate, almost to keep anything to do with the war away from cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. Would he not need that sort of level of support next time, if there was a next time, if he was going to go even bigger, that he's really tried hard to ensure he doesn't need during this fight with Ukraine?
I think in terms of more support, according to Western officials that have given us briefings recently, they feel that Russia isn't running out of people that he could deploy and use as cannon fodder on the front line. And so that's pretty scary, because of course on the other side, and on the Ukrainian side, you do hear a lot of concerns about how the fact that they've not got an abundance of soldiers, and they're also not going to risk their soldiers in the same way that the Russians are. And so in that sense, I think that I think everyone that I'm talking to really thinks that Russia will be able to be in a stronger position. And yes, of course, there's always risk of a mutiny, but we saw how the last one went, and that was a pretty failed attempted coup.
Now, in the meantime, there's been another speech given by the new foreign policy boss at the of the European Union. This is Kaja Kallas. it's sort of echoed, the types of things that you've been hearing in the article that you've written today. Call for more spending, calling Russia an existential threat to our security today, tomorrow, and for as long as we underinvest in our defence. This might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but is it in any way possible to put a sort of figure on what Europe needs to be spending in order to keep the West safe for, I guess, however long Putin has these ideas?
I mean, it's pretty hard to say exactly what everyone should be spending. I mean, we're obviously, we've been told that by the government that they're going to be increasing our defence spending to 2.5% from 2.3%, and it's unclear when that's going to happen. It might not even be happen by 2030. In fact, it probably won't. And yet you hear from Donald Trump that we should all be spending 3%. Now, I can't see the Labour government finding the cash to be able to do that, but of course they're going to be under huge pressure to do so. And also, we've heard that actually the US president would prefer us to all be spending 5%. Now, again, where we're going to find that money, I just can't imagine, because we hear stories every single day about the billions of pounds that the government needs to fix certain things, such as hospitals and schools. And so I don't think there's the appetite for it here at the moment. Now, of course, this would all change if actually we entered into a hot conflict. If we were at war with Russia, then the mindset of people would change here. And you see in countries like Eastern Europe, over there, the public are much more behind defence spending because they can see the realities of what they could face in the future. So I think it generally, everyone in Europe agrees that more needs to be spent, but I think a lot of governments don't think that they have the budget for any, monumental increase to their defence spending.
Just finally, to sort of bring it full circle, we talked about this alliance with China and Russia and North Korea and Iran. And we now know that within hours of Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday, the Chinese President Xi and Vladimir Putin had this video call where they sort of pledged to bring bilateral ties to what's described as greater heights. They insist that it was, that the timing is irrelevant, but they must have been talking about Donald Trump and what they anticipate he might do. Is there anything that he could do potentially, short of giving them what they want, which of course doesn't seem to be in the West's interest, that could weaken these ties in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the two spoke for an hour and a half, so I'm sure that Donald Trump will have come up during that conversation, and I don't think the timing will have been coincidental. I mean, what can Trump do? Obviously, he's already sort of set his country on a bit of a warpath with China when it comes to trade tariffs, and with Putin, we're hearing this sort of strongman rhetoric, trying to attempt to sort of bully Putin into coming to a deal. Now, it might work because if you've seen with Biden, Putin obviously saw Biden as a bit of a pushover. He could do what he liked. Will Trump's tactics work for America? And they might well do so. And actually, what was quite interesting is in the lead up to Trump taking power, some of the Ukrainians were saying, "Oh, well, actually, it's a good thing because anything better than the status quo has to be a good thing because it's hundreds of people are losing their lives every day, and something needs to stop." And so I think actually could be quite interesting in the next few months to see how Trump's relationship with Xi and Putin goes on. But don't forget, Trump has also said he's going to speak to Putin very soon. I'm not sure whether he's going to be able to, try and, I don't know, dismantle any of that relationship between Russia and China. But I'm sure he'll try his best.